Hi everyone, my name is Simon. Welcome to a rendering teardown section. Today we'll be having a look at this pretty cool image. So yeah, let's do it. First things first, the overall image is of quite good quality in terms of texturing and point of view and kind of details. So it's quite good, but as you'll see, there are quite a bit of tiny details we can improve. First one is going to be about composition. So as you can see, the problem we do have here is that the building is like perfectly centered and there's not much room on the upper part of the image, which I think is a little bit of a problem. So what I would suggest is, since the idea also is to like, this is sitting in the middle of the image and there doesn't seem to be anything around it. So I think it would be interesting to increase a little bit the height of the image and have just have the sky. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I'm a little bit concerned with are regarding the animation of the image. So what I mean by that is that regarding the cars first, we do have 1 car, 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars. So that makes like it's really the busiest road you can think of, because we only have like, there's basically 1 car on every street or every lane, which is a lot. So what I suggest is like when you start to add animation, whether it's populating it with people, cars, and other details, is to really pay attention not to overdo it. So this guy here is okay. These guys there are kind of useless, I think. So it's just a matter of balance. So be careful with how many people or how many cars or you put in your image, because otherwise like it can sort of overwhelm the whole image, and then it's only going to be about the cars and not the building, which is not really what you're looking for. Same thing, there's this little problem with the animation of all the windows and the balconies. As you can see here, basically the plant here is exactly the same on every single floor and is also oriented exactly the same way, which can be a little bit problematic because, well, it's just like what you need to do when you're animating a facade is to really create diversity so that you can show that people have their own lives and can tweak their flat the way they want to. So sometimes you need to have like flowers and plants and stuff like that. Sometimes it's going to be nothing. Sometimes it's going to be like a sun chair, stuff like that. So just be careful with this sort of things, because when it's highly repetitive, it really catches the eye. The same goes for the curtain. As you can see, it's really cool to have like curtains behind your windows, because it creates a second level of depth, but it's still like you have to manage to have like sometimes your curtains are going to be closed, sometimes are wide open, sometimes maybe even a window is open, etc. So you have to have this kind of variation, because here, as you can see, it's like exactly the same shape, which is eye-catching. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly is that be careful with the horizon line. Always try to basically hide it or have something in the background that is thick enough so that you don't see the horizon. Here we can clearly see it here, and we see that nothing's happening behind this line of trees here. So you want to basically do something like maybe put a hedge or put like buildings or a skyline or mountains or whatever, but just you cannot leave like the sky go all the way down to here because it looks unrealistic. So it's tiny details, but it's just gonna make quite a difference in terms of realism. Final thing I'm going to talk about is going to be regarding lighting, because there are two problems in this scene, I think. The first one is going to be basically these guys here. It's these guys here and these guys here. Basically, the problem you can see is that we're in broad daylight. The sky is blue as blue as it can get, and still you can see this lighting effect of headlight for the cars, which doesn't really make sense because we're not in it's not nighttime and we don't have braking light here, maybe here. And the other thing is, like, we do have the light of the lamppost here, but they're not even turned on, but we still see the lighting here. So that's something you might want to be careful with when you basically every time you do rendering during daylight, just never use artificial lighting, because it's gonna, if you're in an interior rendering, like doing an interior rendering and you use artificial lighting whereas it's sunny outside, it's gonna mean that your, like, the actual building or the actual scene you're rendering is super dark, which is not really selling in terms of architecture, because if at 3 in the afternoon I still need to turn on the light, it's not really a good point. So you just want to at least overexpose your image so that it gets enough light, but never use artificial lighting. Same goes with the exterior rendering. You don't want to have like headlights and artificial lighting everywhere, and especially this kind of effects if you're in the middle of the afternoon. Last thing I'm going to talk about is still regarding lighting, and it's going to be the problem. There are two problems here. Is that I still don't get how the shadows work, because here you can see they're super sharp. Same happens here, and then here they're extremely soft. So I don't really get how this can work, and I especially don't get how this can happen. Like this this facade here is extremely bright, whereas it's supposed to be much darker than this one. And that's the thing, when you're doing a view of a building and you have two facades, you always want to have one in the, well, not always, but most of the time it's going to be more interesting to have one in the shadow, one in the shadow and one in broad daylight. That way you're going to get a interesting contrast, and you're also going to get two different types of tints and shades of your colors, which means going to be like you're going to get more depth in your image. So if I switch it to black and white like that, I think, well, what I tried earlier was to do something like this. So basically, as you can see, it gets like, first you can well, basically I'm creating it from scratch, so it's not really convincing, but still, like, the idea is you get the light coming from the right, and you have this facade. Always try to get like the smallest facade in the dark and not the biggest one, otherwise it's always going to look a little bit weird, like if it's too dark. But here you can see it sort of sits quite nicely with the rest of the surrounding, and then there's a little bit of dodge, burning and dodge to enhance the glazing and to have some variation in the textures. So I think that's quite different, and it does make it a little bit more interesting. Then it would just be a matter of having like the actual scene lit properly, so I cannot really do it like Photoshop it. And I think that's pretty much it for this image. If I have a look at the saturation, yeah, that's the thing, is like these guys here also are extremely saturated compared to the rest of the image, so that they really catch the eye. So that's the thing, like you've got a lot of cars and they have like conspicuous colors, so, which is something kind of, well, you don't want to avoid having red cars, but still you want to make it a little bit less saturated. So if we have a look at it, it would be we would sort of decrease the saturation of the whole image actually, and of that guy especially, because red is not like well, it has to be saturated, but it cannot be too saturated still. So something like that. quite different. Could be a little bit more saturated, but still, you get the idea. But beside that, I think it's really cool project and cool rendering. Yeah, as you can see, same thing. I was talking earlier about the horizon line, and the thing is, when you see it on your reflection, that's where it really catches the eye in the end when you look at it a little bit too close. So the same way you need to, when you're doing your rendering, you need to put stuff in the back. So basically you have your building like that. Well, just a second, I'm gonna do it like that. So you have your building, you're looking at it that way. You want to have like a really thick line of stuff happening with different heights, because otherwise we're gonna see the horizon. But what you also need is to have it on the back of your camera, because otherwise the reflection here is gonna reflect like just the horizon of your HDRI, and that's not what you want. So always be careful with this sort of setup. It's really easy. You can just like even mirror the whole modeling here and put it behind the camera. It just works. You just need to have something to reflect that is more interesting than just a horizontal line. I guess I'll just finish with that. So hopefully you've learned some interesting tips, and I'll see you around. Bye, guys.
Good night.